Hey there, it's Vashti Sarah. Welcome back to Post Blog. If this is your first time listening, go ahead and hit the subscribe button, like button, follow button, share button, all the buttons to stay connected with the Post Blog podcast. And for those of you who this is not your first time, welcome back. Okay, so now we're back with part 2. And again, we have Ariel Montgomery, new mom, doing all the new mom things. And in this episode, she will be sharing her birth story. And she's going to go in detail as comfortable as she wants to be, or comfortable as she wants to get, detail as she wants to get. And just sit back, relax, grab a cup of coffee. And Ariel, you have the floor. You can talk as long as you want, share as much detail as you want. And I might jump in here and there, but yeah, share your birth story.
Yeah, well, thanks for giving me this opportunity. And as you heard in the last episode, my baby is with me. So I apologize in advance for any baby interruptions, but
hey, we welcome it.
So something I did share my birth story on social media. And so it did give me a chance to think through all this and articulate it. But something I didn't share. So I do come from a large family, and my mom had all her babies at home. And I was actually there for a couple of the births.
Oh.
And so for starters, that experience, made me personally kind of freaked out to have babies. So I struggled with and had a certain level of fear going into pregnancy and the thought of having a baby. I did have some fear in the back of my mind because I had seen, the pain of labor.
Yeah.
And so that was something that I really had to work through. And I also chose to, I wasn't really sure what route I was going to take. I wasn't sure, how granola I was going to be or not granola. And so during pregnancy, I just decided, you know what, as many moms can attest, there are so many opinions out there, and social media is full of what you should do and what you shouldn't do. And it's super overwhelming, the amount of information. And I had a lot of people tell me what they thought I should do.
Wow.
And what I decided while I was pregnant was that I was going to follow my own intuition and make my own decision. And I was going to do my own research. And so I spent a lot of time in my pregnancy researching natural births, researching, unmedicated births, researching vaginal labor versus cesarean, researching epidurals. I just read a ton of different things, and I read a ton of different opinions. And so that really, really empowered me and prepared me for what was to come. My baby was due June 20th, and he came July 8th. So he was almost 3 weeks late.
Wow.
And also he was measuring in our, all of our appointments. I was being told that he was going to be a small baby.
Yeah.
And he was 9.5 pounds. So just a lot of fun surprises. Yep. And if you had a baby, you know that you feel that, a big baby. It's a lot. It's a lot to carry. I'm a petite framed person. So yeah, it was pretty uncomfortable in those end days. And I remember thinking there's no way that my baby is actually small. This is so weird. My husband is a huge man. He's a rugby player. He's 6'2". He's just a large man. So I was like, okay, we're either having a mini me, which is hilarious, or we're having a giant. And all the signs are pointing to a giant, even though anyway, so not surprised that he was 9.5 pounds. It was pretty funny. And carrying him 3 weeks late, I'm sure also had an effect on that. So, leading up to it. So here's the story. I was hoping and praying that he would come on his due date or close to his due date, because my pregnancy was pretty miserable. And towards the end there, I was doing all the things. I was curb walking, and I was stair running. Probably shouldn't have been running, but I was squatting, like just trying to get movement. And I was reading like, what to do towards the end of your labor. So you're doing all like the labor prep on your yoga ball, like all the things. And there was just no sign of labor, like nothing. And his due date came and went. The month of June came and went. We get into July. By the time we get into July, you're now 10 days past your due date. And it's like, I definitely expected to have the month of July to live my life.
Right.
And like, we had like 4th of July plans with friends expecting our baby to be here like July. So you get into July and you're still pregnant. It's like borderline depressing. So I was like, okay, I'm still pregnant. This child is still in me. Oh my gosh. We're like praying. And then you kind of are psyching yourself out, like every night you go to bed and you're like, is tonight the night? Like, because I guess statistically most labors begin like in the middle of the night or something.
Uh-huh.
So you go to bed and you have all this anticipation that you're going to wake up with contractions at 2 a.m. or your water's going to break. And it's like a ton of stress every night when you go to bed because you just don't know.
Yeah.
So every single night I'm just like, we're almost there. So, when I hit 41 weeks, and I'll backtrack a little, let me go way back. I chose to work with a midwife.
Mm-hmm.
And I, after doing a lot of research, decided to plan for an unmedicated vaginal delivery.
Mm-hmm.
And so I picked some midwives. I got, but honestly, I just didn't want to have that whole thing happen in my bed that I'll be sleeping in the next week. So I wanted like a different bed. So just did like the birthing center, which feels like your home and it's just a nice setup. And so birthing center with midwives, that's what I went for. And so legally midwives have to transfer your care to the hospital once you hit 42 weeks. And like, if you haven't had your baby by 42 weeks.
Oh, wow.
So that is a massive element of my story that caused me a ton of stress. I had a plan. I had what I prayed for. I had, just this desire for a type of labor at a certain place. And you get yourself mentally, ready for this kind of labor in this place. And then to be told that you might have to suddenly at the last minute be transferred to something completely foreign to you is terrifying. So that caused me a lot of psychological, I think there was a lot of stress that probably kept me from going into labor. It's kind of interesting looking back.
Yeah.
And so every day, the clock was ticking and I'm thinking I'm going to lose my midwives. And so when we hit like 40 weeks or 41 weeks, my midwife said, okay, go and get a stress test and an ultrasound just to make sure that your placenta is okay. Make sure he's good just because you're past your due date. So I did that. And I shared this, I've shared this previously in my birth story that I experienced. It was very interesting. I experienced a ton of pressure at that first ultrasound. I was like 1 week past due, and the doctor and the nurses came in the room and they looked me in the eye and they straight up told me, I think you should look into being induced. Now I had done my research. I cannot hammer that point enough that I'd done my own research. So I felt very confident in a response and I felt confident in the questions to ask. And so I asked him, I went down the line, I said, do you see any issues with my placenta? Do you see any issues with the baby's heart rate? Do you see any issues with, his size, on and on? And all the answers were no, he's great. He's this, he's that, he's great. But they still would end the conversation with telling me to be induced. And I would say, why? And they didn't really have an answer other than they would say, well, the risk increases after the due date. And I said, okay, but you're not seeing anything. No, but there's a risk. I'm like, okay, but you don't, so it's just kind of a weird, talking in circles kind of conversation. And to be told by, a couple people that you need to induce and then to go home and decide not to listen to them is pretty terrifying. And I had to really work through that fear and I had to work through that pressure. But I'd done my research and I had decided to listen to my intuition and my gut had was telling me that the baby was just not ready. Like, I just knew he wasn't ready.
Yeah.
They had no answer for me. And so I went forward. Again, he still didn't come. So we hit 42 weeks. I go in for another ultrasound, same thing. Tons of pressure to induce, tons of pressure to, and again, they saw no issues whatsoever.
Yeah.
So again, I knew deep down inside, I told my husband too, every single day, I said, he's just not ready. He's not ready to come. He's perfectly healthy. And I want this baby to come when he's ready.
Yeah.
So what surprised me was then in that week, I started to get pressure from my own midwives to induce. And then I started to be like, oh man, like, you really have to face yourself and just say, it's hard to explain, Vashti. I think moms can all attest to this. You kind of come to this point where you have to face the what if.
Wow.
Like,
no what if something happens to the baby?
What if something happens to the baby? And that is something you have to face no matter what kind of birth you have.
Wow.
Every mama, I'm sure, has a moment where there's a point where it is out of your control. And there are things that are in your control and there are things that are out of your control. And there are so many stories, hospital births, not hospital births, all the different births. There are crazy and horrific situations where sometimes there's a stillbirth or something happens.
Yep.
And there's not an explanation.
Yep.
And that, when I left those ultrasounds and I had all this pressure, but no backup for it. And I had done my research on the reason behind the inducement pressure. My logic was telling me, okay, Ariel, you know he's okay. To move forward with your plan. But my emotions and the fear in me was saying, oh my God, what if, am I making the wrong decision? Oh my God, what if I move forward and trust my gut and then I'm wrong? And it is hard to even discuss this because it's such a horrific, and difficult topic.
Yep.
So I don't take it lightly, but you do have to come to a point as a mama. And I will say, if you are choosing to have a natural labor and to ignore the pressure to induce, you have to face yourself and you have to face that decision. You have to actually trust God in an extremely tangible way. And you have to face your fear of death. And that is what it is. It's a fear of death. And it is such an intense thing to say.
Yeah.
But it helped me. I saw another woman verbalize it that way.
Yeah.
And it really pinpointed what it was. And it's your fear of death. And you have to face it. And I found myself having to actually face this fear and listen to my gut and ask myself, where is the fear coming from?
Yeah.
And with, when I did research and when I looked into this, there's so much fear mongering when it comes to the process of birth that it's terrible. I mean, it's so sad. No wonder girls are so worked up about it and so freaked out. And then for some people, getting epidurals and being induced and, having your baby go through all these things and yourself going through all these procedures. For some of you, that's just what your family does. Maybe your mom did it or and your sisters did it. It's just kind of the expected way.
Right.
And so you kind of fall into this way of doing things without doing any additional research. And then for some women, there's just this fear of the pain and of the discomfort and the what if and your babies and all these emergencies because of what you hear on social media. And because you have this large percentage of women talking about these emergency situations that they had.
Yep.
And if you do just literally 10 minutes of research about those so-called emergencies, you'll find that they are not emergencies. And so I want to backtrack because this is a subject that very offensive to people, very sensitive to people. I know and I acknowledge that there are very real emergencies and horrific things have happened.
Yeah.
And I know that has happened. However, when you do some reading and when you do some research, you find that lots of things are called emergencies that are not.
Absolutely.
And that is heartbreaking. And so you've got tons of women, the majority of women around you have gone through these so-called emergencies. Those are all you're hearing about, these stories of all these horrible things.
Mm-hmm.
So of course, everybody's terrified to have a baby. And then on top of that, you're terrified to think for yourself.
Yeah.
And my heart and my goal is to reel it back, go back to the basics, and remember that this is a natural thing. Like, this is a natural thing.
Mm.
And we've made it so medicated and so complicated and so scary when it's been happening for centuries.
Yep.
Without all those things.
Yep.
And it's been okay. Not every situation has been okay, but it's been okay.
Yep.
And so anyway, all that to say, I was determined to remember that through my process, through my pregnancy, that it's natural, to remember that I was actually made to do this, that my body was made to do this, that many women before me have done this, and that unless there is an actual issue that I also, not just what the doctor tells me, but that I agree is an issue, then I, as the mama, am going to have this baby the way I think I should.
Wow.
And that was something that I just stuck to. And so to bring it back to those last couple weeks, you know, it's easy to say that, and then you're 3 weeks overdue. And
right.
like,
yeah.
What am I doing? So to kind of bring it forward, the midwives then were kind of pressuring me also. And we hit the 42-week mark. We had this last minute intervention meeting with the midwives. And we were discussing transferring my care to the hospital, and my heart was breaking. And my husband saved the day and was like, hey, what if we reevaluated the due date?
Oh.
And so we had this crazy meeting, and we did some research, and we found enough evidence about the due date where we could possibly call what we thought was implantation bleeding. We called it a period.
I didn't know you could do that.
Yep.
Wow.
And honestly, it just tells you more too. And this is something like I think women learn too, is that the due date, so-called, only means so much.
Yep.
So that's a side note. Like, just remember that it only means so much. And so I saw that firsthand, that it really didn't mean anything for us, but legally we had to figure it out. So they like changed their documents. It was this whole thing, and they changed my due date, and I got another week. So
wow.
Kind of crazy. But as you can imagine, there's a lot of emotions and stress in those last few days of pregnancy. So we're navigating all of this, and I'm supposed to let my body go into this Zen mode where I can kick into labor and have a child. So it's very stressful. I was like, how am I supposed to, like, you know, and they're like, oh, you need to just like cuddle with your husband and release oxytocin and get relaxed, and then the contractions will start. And I'm like the most wound up person. I'm like, how do I relax right now? Like, I'm freaking out.
Yeah.
So July 5th or July 4th came around. That was so depressing. I'm like, it's a holiday and I'm 2.5 weeks overdue. Like, this is, and so we're praying and we're like, God, please let it be tonight. Like, every night we'd have these really dramatic prayer times and be like, Lord, tonight, you know, trying to kind of like jinx God into
calling,
you know, going with our timeline. You know, it's not how it works. So July 4th came and went. And then Tuesday, July 5th, I went on a walk, and that was also the day of one of my ultrasounds where they were like, you need to induce, like, very intense, telling me to induce.
Yeah.
And I went home and I was like, it's not time. That night I went on a walk and I started having intense pain, painful contractions. From Tuesday night all the way into Wednesday morning, I had painful contractions that were every 30 minutes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Wednesday, I had painful contractions that were every 8 minutes. It just was it was going for a very long time. And I was like, what the heck is going on here? All night Wednesday. So I was up, truly awake, and so was Joe all night Tuesday. There would be like moments in between the 30 minutes where I'd kind of doze off and then I'd be awake again because of how painful it was. And then Wednesday, we're up all night because it was every 8 to 10 minutes. And then Wednesday morning, 8 to 10 minutes, around like noon on Wednesday, my best friend, Hope, drove in from Portland because she played the role of the doula in my birth.
Oh.
Yeah, pretty cool. She's amazing. So she came around noon because I said, hey, I think maybe it's today.
Yeah.
And I was in the living room and I was having these very painful contractions, and she started to time them. And she's like, Ariel, I think it's game time. Like, you're 46 minutes apart. And so I was like, no, there's no way. I was kind of in denial because you also don't want to like think it's game time and then like be disappointed.
Right. Yeah.
So I was like, no, it's not time. So she ignored me and called the midwife, which I'm really glad she did, and put the midwife on speakerphone, and they timed my contractions, and they're like, yep, it's game time. So we got in the car, and I had contractions the whole drive to the birthing center. Got to the birthing center, and what proceeded, and I'll give like some more details, but it was about 13 hours of active labor.
Wow.
And he was born at, I think, 1:50-ish a.m. So there you go. He came July 8th. So the labor itself, really interesting. It's interesting. So, I have heard women describe their labors like, oh yeah, it just felt like I needed to poop. And I've heard that. And they're like, yeah. And then it was really painful for like 3 hours. And then my baby came. And so that was not the experience for me. I'm just going to be totally honest. So it may feel like that for someone. It did not feel like that for me. It hurt much more than that.
Right.
So, and I want to, I'm gonna acknowledge that yes, it was very intense pain. And so if you're a mama and you're about to go into labor, or you're listening to this, like for me, it was painful.
Yeah.
What I'm excited to acknowledge also is that the most insane thing kicks into you if you let yourself like experience it naturally or unmedicated, and you allow yourself to just like, you know what, I'm going to do the thing and I'm going to trust my body.
Yeah.
You will be so amazed at what your body can do. It is the most insane, unreal, empowering experience you could ever have as a woman. I mean that with my entire heart. Like it's insane. It's truly insane. Like looking back, I had painful contractions for 3 freaking days.
Wow.
And when I'm not kidding you, when he came, when the moment happened and he came out, I told my husband, my first thought was, oh, wow, I can't believe he's here. I could keep going. Literally, truly. And my husband was there in my labor, and it was a very painful labor. Like, no joke. Very, 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 like something I've never imagined. Yeah. And in the moment, had the baby, I remember thinking, I have more gas in the tank.
Wow.
And so that's just a testament to like, it doesn't really, like, you can handle it.
Yeah.
And in the moment, like, yeah, the pain comes in waves. If you have the mindset of like, I'm in this, no quitting, no looking back, you just do what needs to be done, and you're not really worried about it. Like, I wasn't worried about it. Like, I wasn't like, oh my gosh, this is so painful, I can't handle it. They do talk about like a brief point in labor where you think that it's called transition, and you feel like there's no way I can handle more of this. And then boom, your body goes into the last couple hours and you can have your baby. So that's a cool thing. And it's a brief moment. Yeah. But overall, your body does what it needs to do. And it's so cool. And your mind kicks into gear. Like, I remember you literally like in labor, those 13 hours at the birthing center, I remember just like my baby was in sight, like I remember just like, he's right around the corner, and these painful contractions would come and I would feel it with every ounce of my body. And it was worth it. Like, it was like, okay, that wave came, that wave went, next wave comes, next wave goes. And it's just worth it. Your babies are on the corner, and you don't doubt that you can do it. Wow. And so that is the coolest thing. That was an unreal experience. When he, my labor, my experience also, was I had a very, very active type of labor. So I was like walking around the room. I was doing a bunch of squats, all the things. So I'm also really, really glad that I worked out when I wasn't puking my guts out for the parts of my pregnancy, that I worked out and I stayed physically strong, because that really comes in handy in your labor.
Yeah.
So that was a cool thing that I got to see. And then, so 10 o'clock. And this is something that we'll discuss in a moment, but my midwife told me to push. I was not ready to push. So I did start pushing per her instruction. And I do believe, looking back, that because I started pushing before it was time, I think that's part of why I tore. So I think when you look that up, when you research it, and when I researched it, I even knew in the moment, I knew better in the moment when she told me to start pushing. And something I learned from it for next time, that I'm going to be a lot more granola than I was even this time.
Yeah.
I will say. And so part of that is that I'm going to discuss with my midwife in advance that I want to be, I don't want to be coached necessarily. Yeah. Like I want to 100% listen to my body.
Yeah.
And I mostly did, but I got a lot of pressure to push before it was time.
Wow.
So then because of that, I was pushing for 3 hours. That kind of effort and exhaustion is pretty hard on your body.
Yeah.
And it shouldn't have happened. Like it really shouldn't have happened. And so learning experience, definitely, confirms my belief, all the more so that mom knows best.
Yeah.
All the more so that the more natural, the better. And all the more so that the more we listen to our body, the better.
Yeah.
So that just, times 10. So I pushed for 3 hours. Again, truly, when he came out, I was shocked because I did have the energy to keep going.
Yeah.
Which is crazy. In that moment, I tore. I had a 2nd degree tear, I believe.
Ouch.
So they had to I was on a birth stool when he came out. So they rushed me over to the bed. They put him on me immediately and he latched immediately, which was pretty awesome, and had a good feed and has been eating well ever since. He's a giant baby, so it kind of makes sense. And they started to stitch me up. And after they stitched me, and it was pretty funny, the immediate empowerment you feel after you give birth. I remember the midwife was like, "Sorry, I'm stitching you. Is this, uncomfortable, blah, blah, blah." And I was like, "No, I just birthed a baby. I can handle anything." Literally. I remember in that moment being like, "Oh, I can do anything. No pain gets to me anymore. I'm like,
I can do it all."
Yeah. It's this weird feeling where you're just like, "Oh my gosh, I'm untouchable." So that was really funny. And then, about I don't know, it's all kind of a blur, but a few minutes in, they had me sit up to use the restroom. So I started to slowly sit up. And I couldn't hear in one of my ears.
Wow.
And I expressed that. I said, "Guys, I can't hear." And my husband and my best friend freaked out, and the midwives realized I was hemorrhaging. So I had a class 2 hemorrhage, which means you lose 25% of your blood.
Wow.
Which is a lot of blood.
Yeah.
Class 2 hemorrhage. There's the option. So if with a birth center, you're right next to a hospital. We could have gone and gotten a blood transfusion, I believe, but I didn't need that. I just needed a couple of IVs. So they put a couple of IVs in me, while I was kind of sitting there and breastfeeding. And so I had to sit and kind of recover.
Yep.
That is a huge part of my recovery.
Wow.
Because I lost so much blood, I was very bedridden for about 10 days.
Yeah.
But we'll get to the recovery in a second. Anyway, so backtrack, lost a bunch of blood. So that was my overall labor experience. I would say the negatives was being pushed before it was time.
Yep.
I do think that affected a lot of things, personally. I also feel so strongly about listening to my body, feel so strongly. And man, Vashti, every parent like thinks their child's perfect and the cutest baby in the world.
Yes.
Well, mine actually is. Just kidding. I know, but it's been really cool because, again, if you do your research on this, you'll also find and see that there are certain things that statistically go smoother if you do not have all the drugs in your system, and if you do not have your baby induced, and et cetera, the ripple effect.
Yeah.
And if you let it happen organically, statistically, your baby latches better, your baby is better at sleeping, your baby is healthier. So, and it's kind of crazy. Like, one, I think we've been really blessed with a chill baby, and that's just like, we might have a screamer for our next one and we need to roll with the punches. But two, I am seeing how healthy he is. I've had an incredibly easy experience with certain things that so many of my friends who were induced are not experiencing. And I'm so grateful for that. And I really believe that some of it is just how it is. And I happen to be blessed with this baby, but some of it, if you were of just letting this baby come when he's ready. And so he came when he's ready, and he's doing the things he's supposed to do. And it's just really beautiful. And I've really seen that and experienced that. And then the other thing I've really experienced is, even with a hemorrhage, my recovery has been incredible. And I think part of that as well is not having the drugs put in my system and not forcing my body further to do things that maybe it's not ready to do. And so it's been really, really cool to see that. And I do tread lightly when I say that.
Yeah.
Because it's my first baby, and I may experience something a little different next time. But I also say with confidence that if you do your research, it's not just my experience, it is statistics. And so it's been really, really cool. And my recovery's been so awesome. And that's been such a blessing. And I think part of that is also how I chose to give birth. And because of how I gave birth, certain parts of the healing have been really cool, because I've been able to get up a lot faster than I expected and live life again a lot faster than I expected.
Yeah.
Oh, brief intermission. Hello, buddy. He's like, Mom, I'm super bored. So yeah, it's just been really, really cool and really empowering to kind of see the fruit of a lot of things. Oh, and I'll say one more thing. This is a really cool part of my birth story. With the setup. So when you're in the hospital, you don't get to experience this as much. My sweet husband was so much a part of the labor.
Yeah.
It was one of the most, the most bonding thing we've ever done together.
Wow.
Because of the way we did it, because we were in a birthing center, he got to literally, Vashti, he like had his arms around me through contractions if I wanted him to. Sometimes I did not want that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So he was kissing me on the forehead and praying with me and holding me and, getting wet. When I literally, the moment that Darius came out, Joe had his arms around me behind me.
Yeah.
And we got to hold Darius together. Like there's a photo of it, like Darius in both of our arms at the same time. And Joe, this sounds kind of grisly, but Joe was literally covered in my blood. Like it doesn't get more bonding than that,
Oh yeah, absolutely.
so I think that's something like, I don't want to like take away from dads, like hanging out in the hospital room and being there. But man, when you do it this route, you get to experience your husband, like really being in it with you.
Yep.
And like the way that empowered Joe and made him just like immediately feel the sense of like responsibility. Gosh, like it was something I had never seen that side of my husband before.
Yeah.
It was absolutely beautiful. It was so stinking beautiful. And so I would not do it any other way except just because of that.
Right.
Just to have Joe like go through it with me and hold me through it and get dirty with me and just like coach me and be so involved. So man, that was pretty awesome.
And I'm looking at the picture right now and I'm seeing just the joy and peace in your face. Yeah. And then your husband, Joe, he like, there's just this like protectiveness, like he's cupping your head and it looks like he's cupping your body too, but just this like is like a transformative thing that happened in him, and it looks like he's crying, but like no, like it's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful.
It was like truly like I watched him. I love that you said transformative. Like I watched Joe transform. Joe, like lots of guys, Joe's a manly man.
He's a man's man.
He's just like you don't really get more man's man than Joe. But a man's man with a very tender heart. Yep. But he's a man's man, and he, had a little concern. Like, he's like, will I know what to do or like having an infant? Like he kind of had some questions and was concerned about how he would connect. And, some dads would tell him, yeah, man, like you'll like it, in a few months, it gets more fun. And so Joe kind of thought he was going to be that guy, and I was kind of worried that he'd be that guy too. And, that birthing process, like Joe, I mean, he was in the thick of it, and he snapped into this like protective, involved, just like in it with us, loving dad. And he has been the sweetest, like just, oh my gosh, I can't even describe it. I can't describe it. It's just the sweetest thing ever. And like the first week when I was super out of it, definitely now I do all the things at night, but the first week, Joe, I was so like, because of the blood loss, I was hard to like stand up and I was pretty dizzy. Joe he would love getting up at night to take care of Darius and to change his diapers and like hold him, and just like took such responsibility, and has bonded so well with Darius so quickly. So it's been amazing. It's really an indescribable experience. So
okay.
Yeah, pretty beautiful.
Yeah, I love your story. I love that you went into detail with it, and you didn't spare, at least to me, I don't think you spared any information, and you were raw with it. But before we conclude this episode, part 2, what would you encourage moms who are scared? And you mentioned it throughout the episode, but for scared moms who are about to go into delivery, childbirth, and even moms to be who are praying to be a mom someday, what would you encourage them?
Yeah. Oh, I love that question. 100% do your own research. That is the first thing. Like now, research, like actually research. Don't just read a bunch of mom blogs. Yeah. To be honest, I did not read a bunch of mom blogs, and I really didn't listen to a lot of like things like podcasts. Yeah. Sometimes that helps, sometimes it doesn't. So for me, getting ready to go into labor, I didn't listen to a lot of like opinion pieces. I did a lot of reading on like statistics and facts. And I researched epidurals, and I researched C-sections, and I researched the benefits of unmedicated and vaginal. So just do your own research, read a lot, and be convinced within yourself. And then next I would say is listen to your God-given, excuse me, sir. Listen to your God-given intuition. Listen to the Holy Spirit, listen to your intuition about how you're going to have your baby, and then stick to it. Yeah. Get your partner on board with it, and tell him to make you stick to it. Stick to it. Don't flop around. And then on a practical level, don't make assumptions about the type of, if you go with a midwife, don't make assumptions about the kind of midwife. Just ask a lot of questions, educated questions. And make sure that you and your birth team are totally on the same page. And remember that the pain, there's such great reward from the pain. And oh my goodness, I cannot tell you enough. It is so worth it. Like I had a 3+ day labor, and I cannot wait to have another baby. So I don't know if that tells you what you need to hear. Yeah. Trust your intuition. It's so worth it. Do your own research. And then I think, I keep saying last thing, if you're able to physically, like work out, do some squats, do some research on what to do for that too. So there's a lot of amazing resources on social media and really just the good old Google machine, YouTube on how to prep for labor as a pregnant mom. So definitely do that. It does pay off. You'll heal faster postpartum if you stay healthy. And you'll have a better labor if you stay healthy. So that's my feedback, and trust the Lord, trust God. He made you for this, and you're going to look back and probably chuckle at how fearful you were. And, if you go about it in a healthy way, you're not going to have this crazy story about this emergency situation. If you do your research and just go into it equipped, you don't need to have these emergency situations. So it can be done.
I love it. I love all of it. And I love how honest you are, Ariel. And it's the honesty that we need, because I think especially when it comes to medicine, we're all 100% in, and we'll believe anything that we hear. And that's not to say medicine is wrong, or people in the medical field is wrong, or, corrupt, but it functions just as any other business, just as there's corruption in, outside business, there's corruption in the church, there's corruption in medicine, and there is some type of gain in these different fields, but bottom line, you have to trust God. And I have friends and family who are in the medical field. They're doctors, they're nurses, they're ER nurses, and, they're doing phenomenal things, but they've also shared the corrupt side of it. And where, we say certain things, or we frame certain sentences a certain way so as to coerce and convince our patients, because what it does, it feeds our pocket. And
100%.
And that's not everyone. That's not the same for everyone's situation, because your bodies are built differently. But, bottom line is trust God. Not everything you hear out there should be what we immediately grab and latch onto. And just pray for a spirit of discernment. And that's outside of childbirth. That's just daily living. Pray for discernment in everything that you do. So
love that. And know that your mindset and thought process throughout your pregnancy and going into your labor and going into how you have your baby, that's going to affect your thought process when you're a mom.
Yep.
So go into that with confidence and trusting your intuition. You'll go into motherhood with confidence and trusting your intuition. And I have seen that firsthand. I have so much confidence. I feel so incredibly strong. And I'm so glad that I decided for myself. And, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I will tell you that the more I learn about the whole medicated childbirth process, I'm starting to teeter that way. Yep. And I will also say that the more I learn, the more granola backwoods hippie I become on this topic. And so, and that's not me either. So this has been really, really eye-opening. And I just hope that people do, like you said, Vashti, bottom line, trust God, and also trust that He gave you discernment, intuition, and a brain for yourself to use, and that you're strong. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, that wraps up part 2 of this new mom life birth story. And part 3 will be specifically talking about keeping authentic to yourself. So don't forget to tune into that episode. And I'll see y'all next time. That's it for today, guys. Thank you for joining me on Post Blog. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button, like button, follow button, share button, all the buttons to stay connected on the Post Blog podcast. Same time, same place next week. I love y'all. But remember, God loves you most.